Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Boss Economic World, the only place where we peel back the layers of the financial onion until we find the truth or until we all start crying. I'm your host, and today we are looking at a story that sounds like a trivial HR policy change but is actually one of the most significant power plays in the history of American central banking. It is Friday, December 5, 2025. The Christmas lights are up, the malls are crowded, and in Washington D.C., the knives are out. We have been talking for months about the new era of economics under the current administration, but today, the rubber effectively met the road. We have Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council and the man who is basically measuring the drapes for the Fed chair's office, dropping a bombshell on Fox Business. The headline? Residency Requirements. The real story? The hostile takeover of the Ivory Tower. Let's break this down, analyze the humor and the horror, and figure out why your mortgage rate and your stock portfolio depend on where a few regional bank presidents decide to sleep at night. So, here is the setup. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a man who looks at the Federal Reserve the way a health inspector looks at a dirty kitchen, proposed a new rule on Wednesday. He wants to mandate that candidates for regional Federal Reserve presidencies must have lived in their specific district for at least 3 years before taking the job. Now, to the average person, this sounds like common sense. If you are the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, you should probably know what a brisket taco tastes like, right? You should know the difference between y'all and all y'all. But in the world of high finance, this is revolutionary. Kevin Hassett went on air today and backed this play 100%. He told Fox Business, "The reason we have all these regional feds is that we want to make sure that we have a federalist system, where different concerns have voices at the table." Here is the translation: stop flying in PhDs from MIT and Harvard to run the economy of the Midwest. For decades, the regional Fed banks have often been treated as prestigious parking spots for academic economists who live in the SLA corridor. They fly in, check the spreadsheets, nod at the local business leaders, and then vote the way the board in Washington tells them to. Hassett is calling out the club. He pointed out the dirty little secret of the Federal Reserve System: the only folks who always get a vote on interest rates are the people who live in Washington and the people who live in New York. He's right. The New York Fed president has a permanent vote. The Board of Governors has permanent votes. The rest of the country? They rotate. They take turns. It's like waiting for the controller in a video game. Bessent and Hassett are arguing that if you don't live in the district, you don't feel the pain of the district. And if you don't feel the pain, you are just another bureaucrat in a fancy suit. Why is this happening now? Why, in December 2025, is the administration suddenly obsessed with the addresses of bankers? It's about ideology. The Trump administration has accused the Federal Reserve of mission creep. Over the last 5 years, we've seen the Fed dip its toes into waters that have nothing to do with interest rates. We're talking climate change stress tests, social equity mandates, and corporate governance diversity initiatives. Now, whether you agree with those goals or not is irrelevant. The point is, the Fed's legal mandate is stable prices and maximum employment. That's it. That is the job description. When the Fed starts acting like a super legislature, unelected and unaccountable, the elected government gets nervous. Bessent's residency rule is a way to purge the system of the globalist academic class and replace them with local business leaders, bankers, and economists who are arguably more connected to the real economy rather than the theoretical one. The current terms for these Fed presidents are up for reauthorization in February 2026. That is 2 months away. When Hassett was asked if this residency rule would derail the approvals, he gave the classic non-denial denial: "That's something I've not discussed with everybody yet." Translation: watch this space. Let's talk about Kevin Hassett. Bloomberg reported last week that he is the top candidate to succeed Jerome Powell. Powell's term ends in May 2026. He is a lame duck in the truest sense of the word. Hassett is currently the NEC director. He is inside the White House. He is effectively the shadow Fed chair. When he says, "I think it wouldn't require anybody to go in and fire anybody who's there now," he is being polite. He knows he doesn't have to fire them. He just has to change the rules so they can't be reappointed. It's a soft purge. Hassett's vision for the Fed is stripped down, lean, and focused purely on monetary mechanics. He wants to dismantle the Federal Reserve of everything and return to the Federal Reserve of money. Now, let's pivot to the actual economy, because Hassett dropped some serious alpha on where we are heading. Remember, we just came out of a federal government shutdown. It was messy. It was stupid. It shaved about 0.4% off GDP in Q4 2025. The mood has been a bit sour. But Hassett is incredibly bullish. He sees a boom in early 2026. Why? 1. The factory supercycle. We have spent the last 3 years talking about reshoring and building. Well, in economics, there is a lag. You break ground in 2023, you pour concrete in 2024, you install robots in 2025, and you ship product in 2026. Hassett noted that we are about to see the fruits of new factories coming online. We are talking about the semiconductor fabs in Arizona and Ohio finally hitting mass production. We are talking about battery plants in the South ramping up. This is tangible supply-side growth. 2. The AI productivity J-curve, Hassett predicts a surge in productivity, helped by investments in artificial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the holy grail of economics. For the last 2 years, companies have been spending billions on AI compute, NVIDIA chips, data centers, Microsoft Copilot licenses. But the productivity data has been noisy. Hassett is betting that 2026 is the year the J-curve kicks in. This is when the integration friction stops, and the efficiency gains start. If he is right, and productivity jumps from the sluggish 1.5% we've seen to a 1990s-style 2.5% or 3%, that changes everything. High productivity means you can have strong growth without high inflation. It is the Goldilocks scenario. 3. The rate cut. Hassett reiterated that he expects the Fed to lower rates next week. It's a good time for the Fed to cautiously reduce rates again, he said. Currently, the federal funds rate sits at 4.25%. Inflation has cooled to 2.3%, tantalizingly close to the target. With the shutdown drag, the Fed has air cover to cut to 4%. This is the insurance cut to make sure the 2026 boom actually happens. Okay, boss, you might say, this is all fascinating political theater, but why should I care if the president of the Atlanta Fed has lived in Atlanta for 3 years or 3 days? Here is the truth: groupthink is the enemy of your wallet. Let's look at the data. In 2021 and 2022, the Federal Reserve missed the inflation boat. They called it transitory. Why? Because they were all looking at the same models, attending the same conferences, and living in the same intellectual bubble. If you had a Fed president in 2021 who was actually walking the floor of a logistics center in Memphis, or talking to oil drillers in the Permian Basin, they would have told you, transitory? My costs are up 40%. This is real. The residency rule is an attempt, albeit a clumsy, political one, to break the groupthink. If the Federal Reserve becomes a collection of 12 distinct voices rather than 12 echoes of Washington, we might actually get monetary policy that reacts to reality rather than theory. However, there is a risk. The risk is politicization. If these rules are just used to install political loyalists who will slash rates whenever the president tweets, then we trade Ivory Tower incompetence for banana republic instability. The Federal Reserve's greatest asset is its credibility. If the market thinks the Fed is just an arm of the Treasury Department, then bond yields will spike. The bond vigilantes will return. So, how do we play this? 1. By the 2026 rebound, if Hassett is right about the productivity surge, equities, specifically industrials and tech, are poised for a rip-roaring Q1 2026. The manufacturing renaissance is no longer a slogan, the factories are turning on the lights. Look at automation stocks, industrial software, and energy providers. 2. Watch the long bond. If the Fed cuts rates next week, short-term yields fall. But if the market smells that Hassett and Bessent are going to compromise the Fed's independence to juice growth, long-term inflation expectations might rise. We could see a steepening of the yield curve. 3. The decentralization trade. This push for regional power suggests that the administration is going to favor policies that benefit the heartland over the coasts. Infrastructure, energy, and domestic logistics are the favored children. Financial services and bloated tech services? Maybe not so much. We are witnessing the end of an era. For 30 years, the Federal Reserve viewed itself as the central bank of the world. It managed global liquidity. The Hassett/Bessent doctrine is clear: the Fed is America's bank. By demanding that Fed presidents be locals, they are demanding that the Fed prioritize local conditions, Main Street employment, local credit access over global financial stability or abstract academic goals. It is a populist move wrapped in a bureaucratic rule change. Is it cynical? Absolutely. Is it political? 100%. But is it wrong? Well, ask yourself this: when the price of eggs doubled, did you want a Fed chair who was worried about the global equilibrium R-star, or did you want a guy who knew how much it cost to feed chickens in Arkansas? Kevin Hassett is betting on the latter. And come May 2026, he's likely going to be the one holding the gavel. The shutdown is over. The factories are opening. The AI is humming. And the Federal Reserve is about to get a very harsh lesson in geography. Stay liquid, stay skeptical, and remember, in the casino of the global economy, always keep your eye on the dealer, especially when he's changing the rules of the game. This is Boss Economic World. See you next week for the rate cut decision.